All right, welcome to Harmony. Don't believe the false advertisement. We're done with Fearless today. You are tuned in to the right channel, the Harmony channel. I'm going to be joined by Chad Jackson initially. I think we're going to connect with Delano here shortly. There's something on Delano's Twitter feed that brought this whole conversation up to me, to light to me. There were two black women, African American women, on I think it's the Christine Amanpour show. Christine was out, and there was a fill-in host, and they were having a discussion about educational outcomes for black kids and whether two-parent homes were beneficial and whether there was really any benefit to a two-parent home. And my mind was blown that we've moved off into a fantasy world where we could even have this discussion where people would be platformed and on television and kibitzing about, if that's the right word, I don't know, but talking about whether or not there were any advantages to a two-parent home. And I was like, we've really moved here. That God's perfect design could be argued about on television and talked about with two women pretending to be smart and articulate, and they can't even agree that the destructed home is a problem for black people. And so I want to play a couple of these clips before I bring Chad Jackson into the conversation. Let's I don't have the right number, but let's start with the first one, Luke, and because I don't have the number readily ahead, but I want you to listen. Let's play them both back to back.
So it is true that when Black children grow up with both parents, they tend to experience advantages, and they do tend to have improved outcomes. It is also true, unfortunately, that they still lag behind their white peers in the same family structure. And my findings indicate that much of that has to do with these wide gaps in economic resources. And so if we really want to turn the tide, we need to be thinking about how to bolster family resources. Instead of making cuts to key social safety net programs like Medicaid and SNAP and Children's Health Insurance Program, we could be thinking about ways to help families to stay afloat during these challenging times by increasing that amount of aid.
We got the second clip.
Point out that Black two-parent families are almost invisible in academic literature, even though they make up nearly half of Black families today. Why do you think that is?
That's correct. Well, for so long, the conversation about Black families has been about single parent families. There's been such a concern with trying to figure out why African Americans have a harder time getting ahead on life. And so then the conversation and the attention has been on these single mother families. And so even though there has been a rise in Black two-parent families, that's not where we have been focused on for so long. Narratives are incredibly powerful in sort of directing our attention and shaping the way that we think about issues. And so because that's been just such a long-standing narrative, the narrative about Black single parenthood, I think it has made it difficult for us to really imagine and think about Black two-parent families.
So what do you think has been lost by not spending more time thinking about this Black two-parent family experience?
It leads us to some pretty false assumptions about what's really driving inequality and outcomes for Black children, but also what we can be doing to level the playing field. Because we haven't focused on Black two-parent families, we haven't known how drastic the opportunity gaps are for this group compared to their white peers. It has allowed us to believe for so long that the two-parent family is this great equalizer, which has actually shown up in the way that we craft policy.
You know what, Delano, you got to help me under what were these two women doing? It struck me as very illogical, but I'm probably a sexist pig, so I'm gonna defer to someone who isn't as comfortable being a sexist pig as me. Delano, what did I just watch here? What were they talking about?
So they were talking about Christina Cross. Christina Cross is the younger woman in the clip. She's a Harvard sociologist who has a new book out about, I believe it's called Inherited Inequality. And the central argument of the book is two-part. One is that Black children do not benefit from being raised in two-parent homes as much as their white counterparts in two-parent homes. And the flip side of that is that single-parent homes hurt white kids more than they hurt Black kids. So she was just laying out this argument. The older woman in the clip is Michelle Martin, who's an NPR journalist and been in journalism for quite some time. She was just getting Christina Cross to talk more about her ideas. So this is not new. Christina Cross wrote about the quote unquote myth of the two parent family about 6 years ago in the New York Times. So I'm familiar with her work, and she's one of she's the type of scholar who connects marriage to white supremacy and heteropatriarchy. So again, it's this idea that marriage is an oppressive institution, that it's rooted in whiteness, and that it doesn't benefit Black families as much as it does white families, which obviously is completely false. But this is the type of thing that you get nowadays.
All right, so Delano, this is basically what you've been looking at for the Heritage Foundation for it seems like several years now. This is your area of expertise. Uh, I just your reaction to their conversation. Just how wrong are they?
So it's two-part, right? The first part is that I think Christina Cross is asking the wrong research question. She's saying, well, Black kids in married two-parent homes don't benefit as much as white kids in two-parent homes, and she's saying, based on economic outcomes and other social outcomes, I don't have the evidence that she's using, the research or the data that she's using to draw that conclusion. I did purchase her book, and I do plan on writing a lengthy review on it. But she's saying she's comparing Black kids to white kids. Now she also will acknowledge that Black children in two parent homes do better than Black kids in single parent homes. So when I say she's asking the wrong research question, what I basically mean is there's nothing that she or anyone else can do to turn a Black child into a white child. But there is something that people can do, particularly individuals and surrounding institutions can do to encourage Black men and women to marry one another before they have children. So I think the first error is the comparison, and this is always the comparison that people on the progressive left make, which is always Black to white, which is not even to say Black folk to whoever's doing best, because if that was the case, they would do Black to Asian, but that's neither here nor there. But the other part, Jason, is that if you listen to what's going on at the end of the clip, this is a intellectual three-card Monty, right? I remember this growing up in Queens on Jamaica Avenue. So you see the guy, right? He's on the table. He got the three cards. He shows them, right? And you have to pick the red queens. Always the red, never the black. He tosses them back down on the table, and he does some hand movements, and then the mark, right, the person who's about to lose their money all the time, picks the wrong card. What Christina Cross does is she shows you the red. She shows you Black two-parent families and says, "Oh, the literature, we don't talk about Black two-parent families enough." She tosses the cards back down on the table, moves her hands around, and the next thing you know, she's talking about more government funding for TANF and SNAP, which has nothing to do with married two-parent families, because the median household income for Black married couples under the age of 65 is $122,000. That is higher than the median income overall for every other racial group, including Asians, right? So she starts by saying, look at Black two-parent families. And then by the time she's finished with you, she's talking about more government welfare programs, which almost exclusively are for unmarried women with children. So those are my two main reactions from this clip.
Chad, what did you discern from this?
Pretty much, for the most part, exactly what Delano took from it. It's interesting because she believes that she's being somehow benevolent and considerate when looking at black two-parent households. And I think the point that she's making is that historically, the focus had been primarily on single mother households, on um, children growing up in homes where they were born out of wedlock, so on and so forth. And so she's saying that, like, for the most part, uh, the political conversation and sociological conversation has been centered around those single parent households. And here it's high time that we focus on those two parent households. But the solution is just the same. The solution is more government handouts, more government welfare, which will have a detrimental effect and impact. It kind of smacks of the Cloward and Piven strategy. A lot of people might be familiar with that, where the idea is to sow um, is to sow cause a kind of strain, if you will, on the economy that will have detrimental results, detrimental impacts, and that it would create the kind of fodder in the pathway to create more legislation, which expands government control and makes people ever more dependent. And so that's what this reminds me of. But we should always be wary of the highbrow intellectual who have all the solutions. Um, I'd rather these people not focus their attention on the two parent household or anything for that matter, because they always leave ashes in their wake.
And I shouldn't have this expectation, but I watched the 5 minute clip and it felt I didn't hear any discussion of God. I didn't hear any discussion of a biblical worldview. This seemed like a very secular conversation. And it's like that these highly educated black women seem to they want to just leave God out of the entire discussion. God created marriage. God created everything. But that's what bothers me about this. It's like the God element. There is no truth without the Bible, without the Word. And so anytime I hear a discussion that doesn't involve, particularly when you're talking about the family and kids, if it doesn't involve God in any way, I'm just listening to gibberish.
So I listened to the entire clip, Jason, to the entire interview, and again, I'm familiar with Michelle Martin's work. She used to have a show on NPR that I used to listen to religiously. It was the first time I ever listened to NPR. So I get that she's just asking questions and soliciting a response from someone who has a new book out. I understand that. You're right. There was no mention of God. And part of the reason is because Christina Cross, I think I'm characterizing her arguments fairly, as a sociologist, is looking purely at social and economic outcomes, right? So she's looking at probably household income, K through 12 grades, suspensions, college, admission and graduation, and that's the argument. And this is what you tend to get with academics, particularly secular academics. They look at the family as so almost like they look at the family as a production function. So if you put two parents in, do you get better outputs than if you put one parent in? And what this ends up doing is making the entire conversation about economics and, as I said, a few social outcomes. There's nothing about the stability for both husband and wife when they have one another. There's nothing about better outcomes for kids, emotional outcomes, the security that comes with a child knowing that if he sits up in the middle of the night with 102 fever and yells out for his dad, that he's going to hear footsteps coming down the hallway. They don't account for any of that. It's always about you'll hear terms like resources. Two-parent families have more resources. So, and even when they say that, they're just talking about money. They don't see the father's presence as in and of itself being inherently valuable. And I think it's important for people to be able to decode these conversations. When they talk about resources, they mean government programs, right? Oftentimes, when they talk about families, particularly when they're looking at the black community, particularly low-income black community, they're talking about an unmarried mother and her children. So this is par for the course, and it's not just Christina Cross, right? There's another guy. I tweeted something that he was quoted as saying in a Rolling Stone article about Cardi B and the baby she's having with her boyfriend while she's still pregnant. And his name is Diedrich Williams. I think I'm pronouncing it right. He's a professor at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and he basically he made a link between white supremacy and slavery, and said, black women coming out of slavery who were trying to put their families back together and reunite with their husbands, they had a difficult choice to make, which was they left one, white supremacist institution, slavery, and then they moved to another oppressive institution, which is marriage. So this is part, and then he linked it white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism, right? So I'm just going to throw that alley up to Chad, and I'm let him slam dunk it, because you already know where these people are going, and this is very much common, particularly among left-wing academics.
Chad, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better than Delano. It's interesting because, you mentioned the fact that these two women made no mention of God. Well, that's because they see themselves as God, either consciously or subconsciously, as do many in the academy. Because it's interesting, people who kind of occupy that space by and large start from two premises. One being kind of an evolutionary framework, and the other being a Marxist framework. And this is what drives a lot of their policies. And when you particularly look at Marxism, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels advocated for the abolition of the family, as did the women over at Black Lives Matter. This is part and parcel of their ideology. And it seems like what this Christina woman is doing, I'm hoping that's her name, is what we tend to see people who are kind of the Marxist contingent do often, which is they kind of work with what they have. The family is still a thing in the West. And so rather than coming out and saying we just want to outright abolish it, they try to find ways to work with it. And in her case, it seems that by saying, look, I'm going to show that I'm sympathetic to the two-parent household by saying that we need to do more for the two-parent household. And of course, the solution, as she sees it, is from each according to their ability to each according to their need. Black people have more need than white people. Therefore, we need to, in a sense, rejigger the system in order to provide for them. We see examples of this with Elizabeth Bartholet, who's a Harvard professor who wants to get rid of the homeschool system. But since we have the homeschool system, and it seems to be a growing trend across the country, here she is trying to influence laws that regulate it with the idea to get rid of it incrementally. And so these people of this contingent, they believe that they know what's best for society, and they move in these kind of tactical ways to really kind of usher in their ideology, because they envision a utopia where their views are kind of the law of the land, as it were.
I want to end on this note with both, because I've shown a lot of discipline on my behalf. I've shut my mouth and listened to you guys, because the things that I want to say are so hyperbolic that I don't want to say them, because I could be making a fool of myself. But both of you, in some way, not help me out or address. My instincts have become so just cut and dry that, like, if I see two women talking about family or something where God has to be addressed, I just make the assumption I shouldn't watch, I shouldn't listen. It's going to move into nonsense, and that makes me feel like I'm Archie Bunker and but that is kind of how I feel. I was like, there's no man in this conversation. Why would my expectations be that this is going to go well? It's just not. And without God headship and therefore man headship, I'm not sure if these women have anything to offer, particularly as it relates to producing well-functioning, properly educated kids or healthy family outcomes. I've said this as delicately as I can, and you guys are better at this than I am, because both of you guys are married, and you're more submitted than I am. I'm running out here a single man at my age. It's ridiculous, and it may increase my stupidity. So anyway, Chad first, and then Delano, you close us out. Can either one of you help me out here with my moronic, Flintstone, primitive take of just like, hey, just me, my instinct of just wanting to say, hey, y'all shut up and let me change the channel. What should I be thinking?
Yeah, I mean, some women will surprise you, but I don't know that PBS is the place where you're going to have any kind of insightful or godly insight into the social issues, be it from women or men for that matter. I too listen to NPR on a regular basis just to kind of get an understanding of what these people are saying and what they're pushing and what their take is on a given issue of our day. I don't think it's moronic to want to tune these people out because it seems that, you know, I'm not sure how Delano feels about this, but it seems that, feminism has so captured, especially our modern culture, that it has permeated the conversations, both on the left and the right. And it's made it to where, those of us who do long for a kind of traditional values, we could pretty much expect that anytime you see, women talking about social issues on television or on the internet, that it's just going to be a bunch of nonsense. And so it's not worth really looking into. However, this conversation to me is particularly intriguing because, as someone who has studied the history of Marxism, the history of social justice movements, the history of these kind of ideologies that seek to, in a sense, rewire and reshape man to kind of fit a more global society. I'm interested in those conversations because, you want to know what the playbook is of those who purport hollow and deceptive philosophies, of those who set themselves up as enemies against the knowledge of God. I'm very interested in the kind of manifestations of how this thing is, spreading and moving about, be it in the academy, be it in entertainment, be it in education, primary and secondary education, so on and so forth. Um, because it's interesting, and I think I made this analogy before, but I was a high school athlete. I played football in high school, and one of our rival teams had a coach that was notorious for finding a way to get his hands on the playbook of the other teams, that he might, understand what their plans are, how they plan on, what is their game winning strategy, and he would obviously use those playbooks to come up with his own game winning strategy. So he would study the other team's playbooks. I feel that we, especially today in the age of information, and everybody's talking, be it online and on television shows, like we have their playbook. And so it would do us a lot of good to study their playbook, not only what they're doing right now, but what they've done historically, in order to, in a sense, abolish the family, or to reshape our economy, or to get rid of borders and nation states. This is their ultimate goal, and what we're talking about here are little minute details of a kind of broader and bigger picture. We have their playbook, and so it would do us a lot of good to study that playbook and see what's going on and seeing what's at play. So while you might be inclined to turn it off or change the channel, I think it's necessary to actually study the playbook if it's right there in front of you. That would be my advice.
D.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree with Chad. I get the impulse, Jason, because sometimes I have it, depending on the topic. Um, but I would encourage you to tap into that journalistic instinct, right? And the first thing is you have to understand what the person across from you is saying, so that to the extent that you form a response, you're correctly characterizing, their ideas. So that's why it's important for me to get a better sense of, to Chad's point, what's out there, right? What are people saying, and not just anyone, right? Like Christina Cross is an associate professor of sociology um, at Harvard. So when you have people in prestige institutions pushing ideas, that are popular on their side among the tastemakers who dictate, media coverage, who dictate public policy, who dictate cultural trends. It's important to know what those ideas are and to be willing to challenge them publicly. And I see that as part of my role, particularly for this topic. So again, when I saw her thing in 2019, and I said, "Oh, this is crazy." So when it got time for me to write my own book on the Black family, oh yeah, I talked about it, and I said why it was crazy. So when I see that she has a new book out, my intention is to say, look, I'm not trying to insult you personally. I don't know you. I don't know. This is not about who you are as a person. It's that these ideas are terrible, right? Unsound, unfounded. You're asking the wrong questions, often irrelevant questions. And I mean to challenge them because I believe one of the reasons that the left is able to spread this nonsense so far is because oftentimes it goes unchallenged. And when it is challenged, it's often in ways that make it easy to dismiss our arguments, which is why, Jason, one of our favorite foils in the show, Professor Brittany Cooper, right? Why I just, however she looks is how she looks, right? But as soon as I comment on her looks, her tribe is going to say, "Oh, see, he just hates her because she's a big Black woman, and this is fat phobia and red," and then they get to dismiss everything else I say. So I try to keep my punches tight, right? Not give them space to hit me with a haymaker, and I just intend to chase down their ideas in the public square so that they can be exposed, and so that, particularly in the Black community, we can understand the play that's being run. Marriage has become obsolete. Fathers are seen as optional. The people who run the institutions, even if they don't believe this in their personal life, because they don't run the Who's Your Daddy DNA truck on Martha's Vineyard. This is what they promote to the masses. So part of what needs to happen is a revolt of the masses against the classes, because this is what we get on a consistent basis, and it needs to stop.
Hey, Chad, I got one final question. Don't want to, but are you going to the voting service? I believe tomorrow at Oak Cliff.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be
Awesome.
at the service tomorrow.
And I think that's in the morning, but I would love to hear from you on how it goes, how it went. I think I love the fact that Tony Evans has opened his doors for this. I think it's great. I think this is the perfect place for this. Hope you enjoy it. And thank both of you guys. We'll get out of here. We'll see you next time. We'll play some Harmony, and we'll see you next time.